We've talked on the YouTube channel about Lost Planet. This is a title, guys, that I really enjoyed the first two games, and then when they brought out the third game, it looked like it was kind of a step in the wrong direction, at least in my personal opinion. And it reminds me a little bit of what happened with Dead Space, where Dead Space had two games that were unbelievable. The first game was transcendent, and then the second game somehow was able to top the first game, in my opinion. And then the third game was a real step in the wrong direction, where they were kind of prioritizing action over horror. And so I've seen similar things like this happen in the past. And Lost Planet, I feel, lost a little bit of its way going into Lost Planet 3. And it's hard to really tell exactly and pinpoint exactly what the issue was there, but it just wasn't as captivating as the first two titles. Well, I want to talk in this first segment of the show about Lost Planet 4. We've talked, like I said, on the YouTube channel about the continuation of this franchise in the future, and I would love to see a Lost Planet 4, especially in current days with the, obviously the updated engines and things of that nature that could really make this a graphical, spectacle to behold. And I think that there was a lot more that we could have done with the story and things of that nature. And so I want to talk about, what happened here with Lost Planet, and could we ever see a continuation in the future? Let's talk about it. So guys, this is an article coming to us from USAID from Gaming Bolt. Lost Planet had an interesting premise, but the franchise slowly faded into obscurity after just a handful of entries and one spin-off. Japan is home to many game development teams in the industry, and there is no shortage of iconic franchises from there that includes, but not limited to, Resident Evil and Street Fighter, among others. In addition to these well-known classics, the Japanese development studios have also actively dabbled in the middle market space with experimental IPs built on a relatively conservative budget. Some of these IPs would go on to become really big with subsequent entries, while others would fizzle out after a lukewarm critical or commercial failure. Falling into the latter category is a little franchise by the name of Lost Planet, which sought to combine third-person shooter action and mecha brawls against the backdrop of a sci-fi dystopia. Over the course of less than a handful of entries and a handheld spin-off, the franchise faded into obscurity. This begs the question, what actually happened to Lost Planet? So, first and foremost, guys, Lost Planet, it sold millions of copies. When you look at it from a sales perspective, it did sell millions of copies. Now, when you compare that to other Japanese titles that have come out, that being like Resident Evil and Street Fighter, it's not even close in terms of the numbers that are done, say, with Resident Evil or with Street Fighter versus that of Lost Planet. But that being said, Lost Planet was a bit different from other action games by Capcom, one of those being that the game was exclusive to Microsoft's Xbox 360 as opposed to most of its other titles, which found a home on Sony's PlayStation 3. The game is set against a futuristic dystopia wherein the planet Earth has become uninhabitable due to factors such as pollution, wars, and global warming, and humanity is on the lookout for alien planets to colonize and potentially inhabit. Upon stumbling on the alien planet, the expedition team comes face to face with an alien race by the name of Acrid, and you embark on a long and arduous journey to helping colonizing this hostile planet. So just the premise alone, guys, was awesome. And I really enjoyed the story. I thought, there was things that they could build upon after the third game. And overall, though, especially with the first two games, I really enjoyed it. I also felt that it'd be really interesting to see us go to a number of other different planets, really expand upon the legacy, the lore that is Lost Planet, but we never got that. Apart from the fun single-player offerings, Lost Planet has also offered a decent suite of multiplayer options as well, which mix the game's thermal energy management systems with standard game modes like CTF and free-for-all, resulting in an experience that was as addicting as it was fun. Lost Planet released in December of 2006 in Japan, followed by January of 2007 worldwide, and critics and fans unanimously praised the game on account of its fun gameplay and engaging multiplayer mode, and it stands at a respectful rating of 79 on Metacritic. As mentioned before, Lost Planet was originally on Xbox 360 exclusive, but the game would soon be ported over to PC and PlayStation a few months later in the form of Lost Planet Extreme Condition Colonies Edition, which added a few new bells and whistles to the game's multiplayer offerings. Lost Planet also enjoyed a great commercial reception, selling over 2.8 million units in lifetime sales for both versions of the game. Now, following the breakout success of the first game, the developer already began laying plans for a sequel. New plans would be added into the mix, such as fleshed out co-op mechanic for the single player campaign that would allow players to work together and share important resources like thermal energy as a team to overcome new threats. Apart from that, the game would also have a change of scenery from the first game, among a slew of other things. Lost Planet 2 finally released in 2010, although unlike its predecessor, the game was released on both Xbox 360 and PS3, which was followed by a PC release a couple months later. So you already see, guys, typically there's two things that have to really happen in order for a franchise to continue or for it to get canceled. And the first one, I mean, really the bottom line, guys, is going to be the money, right? If a game is selling lots of copies, there's a good chance that you're going to get continuations of that franchise. If you don't, then it's pretty likely that it's going to go into a separate direction. They're going to like move on from the IP. The second thing would be critic ratings. So if it gets really well received, especially that on top of having good, a good amount of copies sold, you're most likely going to have an opportunity to get a sequel made. But like I said, if you have bad critic ratings and you have bad, sales, the game is going to go into a limbo state or a state of no return. And with Lost Planet, the first game sold very well, and the second game comes out, and what I loved about these games was it was a full package. It became, from being, single player story, multiplayer modes, co-op modes, the big three when it comes to a video game that I think really brings you back to the experience over and over again. Lost Planet offered that, which I think was huge. Now, the developer also produced a handheld spin-off for the franchise in the form of EX Troopers that released for the PS3 in 2013, which added new elements such as a melee fighting system and a jetpack, among others. The game didn't have a strong critical or commercial reception, and at least the latter of these problems can partly be attributed to the game being released in Japan only. So yeah, I think they set that was doomed to fail because of it only being in Japan. For the third mainline game in the franchise, development duties shifted to Spark Unlimited. This prequel would veer away from its predecessor as it incorporated some role-playing elements into the mix, such as side quests and crafting equipment, among others. In addition to this, the game would also add an element of survival horror into its gameplay as the camera jutted really close to the protagonist's shoulder and the mission environments felt claustrophobic. Now, Lost Planet 3 finally released in 2013 for all major platforms, but failed to really impress critics once again. The new direction for the series was criticized by players as it made for a repetitive gameplay experience that goes on for way longer than it needs to, and the gameplay mechanics didn't boast much depth either. Between having the series' lowest Metacritic score of 61 and the game being developed by an external studio not previously involved with the franchise, Lost Planet 3 flopped on a commercial level as well. Unsurprisingly, there's little to no information available with regards to its sales figures, which usually tells us, guys, it didn't sell very good. So number one, didn't do great. It wasn't a terrible Metacritic score, but it wasn't great either. And then on top of that, you're not even going to release the sales numbers. Most likely it was a real bomb when it came to the sales for this title. So with 3 commercial failures to weigh against one breakout success, this developer naturally put the series on indefinite hold after Lost Planet 3. Rumors of a franchise revival started doing the rounds as the developer had allegedly pitched a potential Lost Planet 4, but the management refused since the investment needed for the project would be too risky for a niche franchise. Jump to the current day, and it seems highly unlikely that Lost Planet would be resurrected once again, and that's a shame because these games could end up being a lot of fun when they were firing on all cylinders. And I totally agree with this. I mean, I think that Lost Planet had a lot of really great things to build off of. But once again, when you go away from one studio to another, there's a big risk there, first and foremost. But secondly, when you made the handheld game that of course was just in Japan, that was, just not a good move. That did not help the franchise whatsoever. I think they were building on something though after that first game, and then when you got to the second one, it felt like they were starting to build some momentum. It reminded me a lot of like Gears of War in terms of not so much like the horror elements of it, but it felt like it was going down that same trajectory. Like this could be a special franchise, especially for Xbox, being an Xbox exclusive at first. But then they just started making some poor decisions, I felt, as a studio, and that's ultimately what led it to its demise. As for what happened to the series, it's rather obvious. Ever since the release of the first game, the sequels didn't quite hit the mark in their gameplay and story departments, resulting in an underwhelming critical and commercial reception over and over again. As a result, the developer had to put an end to the series since the investment didn't bear any fruit. All that said, we do really hope to see the franchise return to the mainstream once again, but we can only wish for now. So, I'm going to put this out there. I mean, I absolutely want to see a Lost Planet 4 in the future, but I'm going to pitch something that would be very similar to what we've talked about on the YouTube channel when it came to Dead Space. Obviously we have to be, as a community, we have to echo Lost Planet 4 into existence. If we ever want this game to happen, we've got to be the ones that make it happen. But the first big thing, I think, the first big step would be to do something similar to what Dead Space did, and that is creating a Dead Space remake. Bringing the very first Lost Planet game that they know, that tried and true formula of the first game that sold millions of copies like that, they know that that was the most popular game. And so if they bring it back, make a remake for the first Lost Planet, it could really revitalize the Lost Planet franchise. Now, I don't think that they should bring back the second and the third one, especially the third one for sure, unless they do like a remaster or something of those two and they change little things about it, and then they launch Lost Planet 4. I know it seems like a long shot, but I would love to see Lost Planet 4 make a comeback, and I'm going to continue making content about it, guys, because I want to see Lost Planet 4 come back into the fray. Let me know, though, what do you guys think about Lost Planet, and do you think Lost Planet 4 could ever see the light of day? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And for more Lost Planet 4 content and videos, stay here with zrotv.